Well, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to another episode of Teach Jenn Tech. And today we have Christian to talk about queries and databases and all the fun things. And we became friends because of Jacob's Twitter Spaces. And I think actually Theo saying that you would be a good person I should talk to about databases.
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me, by the way?
I
Okay,
can.
sweet.
All of you here, Christian. That's the more important part.
Yeah, I think we were both in Twitter Spaces, where I usually hang out, and you're just like there, probably like excited to talk about databases, and I was like doing database stuff at the time. So yeah, it's like good. I think I met you, and I was just like running around San Francisco, going to work, and then just like sat down, had like an awesome conversation with you, like made my day. And then like
Yay!
watched the stream. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's good to finally be here.
Yay! Yes, it has been. Also, everybody calling me out, and I love that so many have about like actually like showing up on time and like having consistency, because I would like not have anyone on the show for a while because I'd like forget or like just life, and now I'm like, oh, I actually have to make this a priority of on time so people know when to show up because that's kind of hard. And thank you everyone for joining. We got Learner and is it Ariel? I feel like I'm looking at it weird. Is that how I say your name? I feel this is like the hardest part about like streaming is I'm always like me and names. Even if it's like a normal name, I'm gonna be like and Nick, and there should be a leaderboard about starting streams on time. Hey, the stream wasn't on time, but it did not burn your ears from how loud the music was going to be on the countdown that I was so excited I got working. So
Yeah, the countdown was pretty loud. It was yeah.
I am glad you saved everybody's ears. And also, so yes, we met on Twitter Spaces. You're in San Francisco area. You
Mhm.
used to live in Denver, right?
Yes, yeah. I was born and raised in Denver, so that's still very much like I guess like home for me in a way. Um,
And it's just funny because between you and Tim Berglund, you both used to live in Denver. When I was in Denver, didn't realize it
yeah,
until like shortly after you both moved. And I was like, oh,
yeah. And then I
ew.
think do you talk about where you live, by the way? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, I'm in Phoenix now.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in Phoenix now, nice and toasty.
Yeah. So you just like moved. Yeah. So like all the like us being in Denver at the same time, it's like almost lined up, but just like didn't quite, which is yeah.
Are you going to Denver Startup Week? Like that's a good time
Uh
to visit home.
no, I'm not doing any traveling for a while. I'm on a
That's fair.
very yeah. Once a I call my mom sometimes and she's like, oh, like when are you visiting home next? And I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea anything for like the next 3 or 4 months, and then everything will settle out and I can like potentially travel again. But yeah. It's
I'm going for Denver Startup Week. One of my talks got accepted. And so I'm very excited to visit again. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm really glad I have a cool job that lets me travel. And,
yeah.
you know, I get my talk there is for mental health and neurodiversity in tech. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm very fortunate that work takes care of that for me. And it's pretty cool to be able to talk about Ivan there. But then also, since learning about databases, I don't, why do so many people, I feel like databases get a bad rap.
Yeah. I think generally they're just a very like hard problem. Like
Okay.
they're incredibly hard, and like even for me I've like scratched like the surface of like seeing how like things work, and it's just like an incredibly tough problem. I think only very recently has like the experience around that gotten a lot better. Um and I think part of that is just like developers have been like wanting it to get better, and so companies are just like spraying up and like, hey, we're gonna make this better. But yeah, Yeah, they definitely get a better app. And there's also like a lot of like infighting between what is the best one, but that's like with every developer tool. So there's like, like grand factions of like all the people who like Postgres or MySQL or who are like NoSQL and are doing like MongoDB or Dynamo or something like that. Everybody
Um,
has very strong opinions.
so that is probably the one that, and for anybody like in the audience, please also chime in on what are the big differences between MySQL and Postgres, and why would one be considered better? I'm still
Ooh.
struggling with that one specifically.
Um, hmm. Man, I wish this is where I need like a way better understanding of database architecture, but I think the sum of it is MySQL is has the potential to be a lot more scalable. And I think when you talk about scalable, it's like these are the things that like big companies worry about or like big enterprises worry about. Like if you're on a personal project and you're like, should I pick MySQL or Postgres? It's like, honestly, you can pick either and you'll probably be happy like with either one, unless your project somehow scales super highly. I think at that point, like what provider you pick, how much is it going to cost is like way more important to you than like the actual underlying database management system. But once you start getting to scale, things like how do you shard your database, or like how do you if you decide to scale like horizontally or vertically, horizontally meaning you just add more and more database servers, and the vertically meaning you just scale, I believe, the compute of those servers.
Mm-hmm.
Like deciding how to do that becomes more and more complicated.
Okay. What
So
is so this is me like not being in it. What's sharding again? Because it's not about your pants and somebody having a bad day. It's about like
no, no. So charting, I believe, is like you split your database into sort of multiple uh, different parts and you run them on just different servers, right? So you're like, okay, typically databases, not typically, but like when you start off, your database will run on like one server, just one box, and it's all good. And then as your server sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you need to split it out across multiple different servers in order to make sure that like it can scale properly. This is why like I'm gonna do my plan scale shilling, and I hope I do it properly. Otherwise,
yes.
Sam is going to DM me and be like, you're wrong. But the reason why
Then
plan
Sam will they'll just have to come on the stream and like, do something as well.
Yeah, I need to do my planet scale shilling properly because I want a database hat. I still have not got a database hat yet, and I
Right.
need to like email Sam and be like, hey, I want my database hat.
Come on, Sam. Let's do
So
this.
yeah, so the thing that makes like planet scale at least very nice is that it handles all of the sort of like sharding of the database for you, where it'll say, okay, like this database has like reached a certain amount of like load, and it will just like split the database up in a way where that load is sort of handled across multiple different servers instead of one server. The hard part about that is just making like if your data is in multiple different places instead of one place, finding it becomes very difficult, right? Because you need to like orchestrate queries across multiple different servers instead of one server. And so,
Mhm.
you know, companies like YouTube who have like reached such a high scale have spent 10 years building out technology that allows like this to be done efficiently, allows the database to be run like super fast. So it's like databases are they're very, very hard problems. And I've probably butchered like half of these explanations because like I still like understanding how exactly all of this works is still super tough. But yeah,
And
hopefully
I
that's a
appreciate
good
you.
overview. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on here because I feel like uh this is something that Jacob will ask me, and for those who haven't met Jacob, you need to like stop what
Mhm.
you're doing and go follow Jacob and go show up on his Twitter spaces because he's also just super fun to poke fun at, but he is, and tell him how lovely of a human he is. But he also is someone that challenges me the most, and it drives me bananas because he'll be like, Jen, why are you learning Postgres? Why Postgres? Why SQL? Why not NoSQL? And I'm just like, I don't know yet because I don't understand. But
Mhm.
having him ask me these questions has helps me quite a bit with like understanding and realizing that it may make sense if somebody explains it to me, but it doesn't always make sense explaining it to others,
Yeah.
which It's a challenge. So I totally appreciate you going through that. Oh geez. I don't think I want to ask that, Nick. You ask him. Oh geez. Okay. Well, anyway, so how did you get into databases and data world?
I still feel very, very new to all of it, to be honest. But basically, I was at I worked at a company called Courier, which I left in May. And while I was there, we were sort of like working on launching a new product. We were going and just like changing a bunch of how the database worked. So I was just going and like learning how DynamoDB worked and reading like over AWS documentation. And AWS is like very, very, they're very thorough with their documentation, but like, you have a week to ship a feature, or we were running out of time to ship a feature. And it was like, okay, I need to learn how DynamoDB works and all of its complexities and how to scale it properly and, how to design it properly. So I don't like hotkey a table. And hotkeying a table just means that there's a certain like set of data that you're trying to access. Dynamo just has a bunch of specific design patterns where if you break a few of the rules, your entire database slows down. Dynamo is also connected to other parts of or other services in AWS. So if you slow down Dynamo, you end up slowing down like other services as well, which is fun. So you have like a very fun cascading effect. But I was trying to learn how to do all of that in like a very short amount of time. And when I sort of like looked to see if there were like any tools to like solve this problem for me, it was just, and yeah, it's not necessarily a document database, but it is like a NoSQL database. I think like a document database is like a little bit different. Learner, sorry, just talking to chat. But anyway, so yeah, I was like sort of going through and doing all of this. I was looking for a tool that would solve this problem, and then I just didn't find one. And then I sort of realized like a lot of like the way that you design databases is in code, and there's this sort of like weird bridge between like the code that you write in your database and like where your database is actually hosted. So I started like trying to learn all of this and solve these problems, and then eventually like left Courier and like started a company to like do all of these things to solve. Wow, reading chat and talking is super difficult. Respect to all the streamers. I'm sorry, I'm just realizing this now. But
You're
yeah,
good, you're good. But really quick, I wanted to ask, what was the database called? Because
oh, it's
I
called
looked at
Dynamo.
and I was like, "It's not dinosaur," so I'm just gonna like pause really
Yeah.
quick and make sure. Uh, Dynamo.
Yep.
Oh, hey, it can.
Yeah.
So
I
this is what we are talking about. I
yep.
will link it.
Yeah, I dropped it in the chat. So it's yeah, it's it's most commonly used, I think, by people who are like doing a lot of serverless stuff on AWS. It's a fantastic database, super scalable. You just basically, if you set it up properly, you never have to worry about scale ever. But you also, when you do set it up, it is very, very hard to change in certain ways. So you get the scale, but you also just like can't mess with it at all, which is very fun.
And yes, having so many streaming and replying and typing, and yes, it's a lot of fun streaming. And this is why I'll be like delayed. I feel very fortunate because Learner will just like ask me a question again if I like forgot like spaced replying, or I'll just like cut off what I'm doing and like cut someone off to reply to it, and I'll be like, oh yeah, there we go. This is good. This is good. So you're doing great and replying, and thank you for putting it in the chat. Okay. Now, if it's a NoSQL, how and why did you learn SQL queries?
So for me, when I was sort of thinking about like what I should build or the problems that I should solve, initially it started off just being like, okay, I'm going to build like a really good DynamoDB studio. And then I just sort of thought, well, like all of the customers for that are like super limited. And also, well, they're not necessarily super limited, but there's just like a very limited subset of people using Dynamo. And sales process and all that stuff is hard. But I eventually just like went, and I had been like familiar with using PlanScale, use it on a bunch of like my personal projects. And sort of when I was like explaining the idea of like what I wanted to do, like talk to a bunch of people, and I was like, okay, I'll make PlanScale like makes migration super easy with Prisma. So I'll just build you like a way to do database migrations in SQL, because that seems to be something that is like really hard to do. So you can like look at your SQL schema, understand it, and like make changes to it. And then I just got suggested, I'm pretty sure by Theo, to just start with PlanScale, which ended up being like a very good decision for a multitude of reasons. It's why I bring up PlanScale a lot when I talk about databases, but I like genuinely love that product. It's very good. It just solves like a lot of different problems. I better get this database hat. I'm gonna send this entire stream to Sam, and I'm gonna be like, I better I better get that hat.
And then, well, just Sam, so that way you know Christian's doing amazing. And now, Sam, you need to be on the show as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Sam's pretty cool.
Because that's actually happened when Bakari was on my show. At the very beginning, he was talking about Square. I think Square. And so somebody from Square actually joined in and came on the stream after him too.
Nice.
Because it was cool seeing the progression of it. So
yeah. So yeah, that's sort of like why I like SQL, I guess, is just because yeah, there are definitely problems in NoSQL land, and actually I might end up building some tools for those databases, but just in SQL land, it's like a lot of the problems were there. Also, when I was talking to a lot of people, a lot of people were moving to Drizzle, and Drizzle at the time didn't have a studio. They didn't have a studio, which is pretty cool. And so I was just sort of like building for that, because again, I had also missed like having Prisma Studio around. Like going and like having one place where your data is easily accessible is like so nice. I've like I've worked at like 3 companies, which is not that many companies, but I started off actually being a software tester, and I worked at a company called Maxar as a contractor. And so with them, I was like doing testing for their image ordering service. They do satellite imagery. And so I just like have to go and like see a bunch of logs, find all like the data within those logs. That was always like a fun process of like tracking down IDs and then sticking stuff into, it wasn't Insomnia, but Insomnia's competitor. I don't know why I'm forgetting their name, but just like finding and like hunting for data was all I did there. And then when I left and I went to the first startup that I worked at, Hyper, it was like, again, doing the same thing.
Postman?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
It was like going in, finding data, updating data. And we were using a tool called Compass, and like Compass was fine, but it was like slow to start, and then it was like buggy and had all these issues. And then even going to Courier, it's like we have their notification infrastructure service. So, you know, we would go through and like, if you sent a message, tracing like how that message went through all of the services in the database is like hard to find. So there are just like all these problems with like finding data, and it's just like mildly frustrating enough for me to be like, all right, we're gonna do this and like solve this problem. And SQL just happens to be like a really good place to do it, I think. So, or doing it for relational databases, it's just like, yeah.
Very cool. And to fill in some gaps to make sure also my understanding is PlanetScale is MySQL, and they're built upon MySQL, where like Mongo and some other ones are actually not built on top of like Postgres or MySQL or anything. They are their own, like Mongo. They're their own type of databases. And so like Ivan uses all open source platforms like Postgres or MySQL or Redis and Kafka, and lets them build upon each other. Where like Confluent is Kafka only, Startree is Pinot. And so that's something that was very hard for me to understand and like ClickHouse is ClickHouse. All these databases, and they all do different things, is realizing that sometimes a company is building upon a certain database rather than its own specific database. If that made sense out loud.
Yeah. So MongoDB is just like pure MongoDB. I'm not honestly sure. I don't fully understand how they work, but yeah, they're like their own separate database. Whereas like you said, Ivan hosts MySQL, and they host Postgres, and they host like Redis databases and whatnot. And then yeah, PlanetScale is in this weird PlanetScale and like Neon and other providers. Neon is in this weird, like they're building their own infrastructure. PlanetScale
Okay.
uses MySQL, but they're like built on top of the tests, which is this like database sharding sort of orchestration thing where they like let you host your database and like scale it very highly. So yeah, there's all these sort of ways. There's like your database management system, so Postgres and MySQL on the relational side at least, and then there's like where you host it, and there's a bunch of intricacies there, or the technologies you built on top of it. So yeah.
And as a heads up for all of our new joiners, first off, definitely click follow, because I talk about databases a ton. Like that's a big part of the show. And the reason I say that is I work at Ivan. So I started working at Ivan, which is the open source data platform for everyone. And I'm working on getting it down. And a lot of my learning is I'm curious about databases in general. A lot of what I learn about, I compare so that way to Ivan, so that way I actually understand what the company I do does better. But that is to say that like I'm still forming my opinions to understand the tech. It's so vast. Like we just talked about so many different databases that 6 months ago I would have been like, what did you just say to me? That would have been like almost all of it. So linked in the chat has been all of the resources we've talked about, all the tools. Nick, you put, I don't even know how to say it, HTTP-IE. Is that like, does it have an actual name? Like, do you say it like that? Hipty?
I have no idea. Oh, this is I think he was talking about like Postman competitors.
Yeah. Can you link those in there just so that way we have the links if we want to
Yep, there we go.
Oh, hey, thanks. That works. Very cool. Okay, so we've talked a lot about background. We've talked about some theory. We've talked about like how you got there. As a quick one for everybody else, I ended up working at Ivan throughout, like with Teach Jenn Tech, this stream. It's been around a little over a year. And I was kind of going wherever people showed up on this show. I was like, teach me all the things because I don't know what to learn. And I was applying for jobs, and I had an interview with the team at Ivan, and I was just like, why are databases so cool? Like, it's the first thing I got excited about. And I was like, I don't understand why databases are so cool. And then I realized that a lot of people don't talk about databases, and they don't like databases. They find them very boring as well. And I'm like, but they're so fascinating, and they store all your stuff, and they do all the things. And so, of course, that in turn came to falling in love with databases, specifically Postgres for myself. That one was because it was the first one I learned, which I feel like a lot of us fall in love with a lot of our first loves. And also it's an elephant.
Yes.
I love elephants. They're my favorite, absolute favorite. So that was an easy one. And between that and Josh Goldberg coming on the show like once a month to do TypeScript, my land fell into falling in love with Postgres and TypeScript. But they don't go together unless there's a lot of things in between it. And yeah, I don't know queries very well. And here's probably going to be I feel like this is the simplest yet hardest question. What is a query?
So best way to answer this is so SQL is called like the structured query language, right? It's like a standard that's used across a bunch of different databases. It's like I believe it's an ANSI standard. Don't ask me what ANSI stands for, but it's like it's a standard that is established by like one of the governments, and it basically is like a bunch of like essentially a bunch of different words you use to talk to the database, right? And you can do every database does it a little bit differently, right? So there are certain commands available in MySQL that are not available in Postgres, but generally there's like a bunch of like standard statements, like the select statement. Like a select statement will always work like basically with every like database that you'll ever run into that runs SQL. So SQL is not, by the way, your like underlying database. It's just the language you use to talk to your database. So you can have like a relational database that speaks something that is not SQL, but they're not very common.
I'm pasting along the way. As you're explaining things, I'm Googling and pasting them in here.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's not a learner. You're going to have to be on the show someday, especially because you stay up so late. Y'all, it's like midnight in where learner is. Anything with SQL that's not a procedural block is a query.
Yeah. Oh, and he links the ANSI standard. Sweet.
Oh, hey. That's cool.
Yeah. So
I'm looking at it really quick. Okay. We got an idea of what a query is then. And using SQL is the way that it's been explained to me, and I'm not sure if this is accurate, is that it is a language then, because it's a way it's talking to a database.
Yes. Mm. Yeah, it's okay. Yes, it's a language that like is like actually very nice to work with. I believe when I went and like reviewed all of this, because I spent a little bit of time yesterday, it's like based on some sort of math. I like didn't have enough time to dig into it deeper, but it's pretty interesting. Also, the reason why it's nice, it's very English-like. Also, it ignores white spaces. So do you have like I guess I could pull one up. If you have like a SQL editor and you like type in a SQL command, right? You can like make it like make it multiple lines very easily, which like makes it very, very readable. Yeah, so it ignores white spaces, which is pretty nice.
The Googles and I don't have one. If you have one that you may suggest.
Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yeah, for sure. It
should
be down.
Warning. Okay, is there anything on my computer I don't want people to see? No.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad it gives you a warning.
Yeah, it's like this is done best on 2 monitors. And I'm like, okay.
Really funny for everyone. When I first started streaming, I shared my screen and I didn't realize Twitter was up, and I'm new to Twitter, so I don't even know that Twitter is even that cool or anything. And all my DMs were open. So luckily back then, only like, I didn't actually have real conversations like I do now, or like privacy and things like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I know. And I won't do that in the future.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, cool.
Sweet. So yeah, so this is like MySQL editor and whatnot. And the thing I was trying to say is the nice part is like this command works the same way. So if you have like a very long query, because it ignores white spaces, you can just like make it very big and add a bunch of stuff under it, and it will still work properly. So very English-like, very easy to like work with. Used in a little bit like SQL Fiddle, kind of, yeah. So yeah, it's like very, very easy to work with. Works across a bunch of different things, and it works like this is not only for like so like databases like Postgres and whatnot, like you might think of them as like, oh, I can only use this to sort of like work with data in production for an application. But SQL's also like used a ton in like data warehouses and all that stuff. So like learning it as a language is actually very useful. I will tell you, when I was at Courier as well, we like had to go and figure out like what users were using a specific feature we just built. And so we would go and use SQL to query data in our data warehouse that came from like NoSQL databases as well, which is fun. So you'll like pipe it in, transform it into something that can be stored in a relational database system, and then use SQL to query it. That is how good of a sort of language it is to work with data.
Very cool. And just to take a pause really quick, Y'all don't get to know what this is yet, but what we're seeing right now, Christian will be on later on to talk about it, and I'm very, very excited. And I have a feeling Christian may not know this, but that he'll need to be on the show more often to talk about this kind of stuff. But we'll see. That's very cool, and thank you for explaining this as well, because when Learner said that it's very English-like, I didn't quite know what that meant, especially because even earlier today, I was talking to someone from the Women in Postgres team, and she was talking about how it's hard for a lot of engineers to learn SQL, Postgres, or MySQL, or any of them, because they are not as much like a computer language as they are like a spoken language.
Yes. Yeah. And it's super. English is a very funny language, so it's like having it definitely is a lot more of a spoken language. My face lit up too because I have a Postgres hat that is somewhere in my stuff that I haven't unpacked yet. And I'm pretty sure I got it from potentially the person you talked to. I forget her name as well, which really, really sucks. But yeah, thank you for that hat. If she somehow ever sees this.
I will tell her. I'll be like, hey, look, I'm learning because I'm going to apply for Postgres Europe, Postgres Conference Europe to see. And I'm like, I'm really excited because I don't know these techs yet. And that's something that I heard a lot of people do is they'll apply for conferences about tech they want to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
one thing too is syntax, or I guess the syntax of SQL, that when I was sort of doing some review, I thought is like a good way to explain it is like generally your SQL commands will follow like what you want to do. So like select, update, delete, insert, and then sort of like on what piece of data. So from like what table, and then it'll go to like limited by what. So it'll be like, I want to update these rows that match this specific requirement. And then if you're like selecting rows, if you're getting a bunch of rows, it will also have the option of like, how do you want to organize them? So do you want to group rows by this specific ID? Do you want to sort of order rows by a specific thing? That's like a good way to like sort of think about that. So it's like, what do you want to do? On what sets of data do you want to do it on? Do you need to limit it by anything? And then how do you want to like, if you are getting rows of data, how do you want to like organize this data?
Okay. Here I will
Have,
because I've done this before in the past where like, let's see if it'll come up. I need to start doing it a different way so that way like everybody can edit it. But so like you said that there's 3 parts. It helps if I put my pen the right way. Of there's what do you want to do? You want to do. We can finish writing. What data? Is that the second one you said?
Yeah, on what data, or sort of like where do you want to do it? So like what table, basically.
Okay. What table? AKA where? And then what was the third one?
I have such short memory. Limited by what?
Okay. What does that mean? One more time.
So limited by what meaning, if you run like a SQL command with no limits, it will run on every single row of your table. So there's a very can I share my screen again? We can show a very
for sure
example of this. Okay. I really need a dummy database, but it's okay. I'll do it on a table that doesn't matter. So if I go, we can go. Okay, so we have like all of these sort of rows in this sort of table that I have just to do experiments. So if I say like delete from, so delete is just like your SQL command, from is just the the sort of the word used to. Why am I having such a hard time explaining this? Like delete from is
Word
like
to
the statement you use.
remove
Like
something?
words you no, it's the word. It's basically like when you're saying from is like you're saying where you're going to do this action. So delete is the command, and
Oh.
then from is like the sort of thing saying, okay, I'm going to do this on this piece of data. Does that make sense? Hopefully, I'm like butchering this explanation.
No, you're good, you're good. I think this
Okay.
is, I'm
So like
also processing on, like
if I say select from, the next word after from is generally the name of the table that I'm getting things from.
what is the star? And are the stars always needed? Because I feel like I got very stuck on stars and
Mhm.
question marks lately.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, the stars are not needed. The reason why it's there is it's to say that I'm selecting every single column from the table.
Okay.
So I can select specific columns. I think you do have to specify uh, what you want. So like you either have to have the star, I believe, or you have to specify the column names. So I could say if I just wanted the IDs from this table, I could like run this command and it would give me only the IDs from the table. And
And
then
then alpha
column
is
step.
the table, right? The table name?
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, so select is like, by the way, I write all of these things lowercase, but Siegel is not case sensitive with its commands. So like these two things, these two statements, same statement. You might see like
Okay.
SQL written in all caps, or you might see it written lowercase. I write it in lowercase just because, yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's nice to write it up like fully uppercase just to like have uh, to sort of like see the statements be a little bit different from the data that you're actually using, right? So it's like, let's say if you had like a really long SQL query, like select alpha from where ID is 1, and you like this were to go on and on and on. Sometimes it's nice because then you can see the things like the pieces of data you're actually working with versus like the SQL that you're writing, if that makes sense.
Yes. You should add
I
a
should,
syntax highlighter. Okay.
yeah, yes.
And learner says they prefer to keep keywords in uppercase as they've seen that used in most places, including work.
Yeah.
And that I've seen it that way too. I think for myself, I probably will end up I end up putting them lowercase because for some reason until today it didn't really distinctly stick that it's not the same as a coding language like JavaScript, for example, because you know how JavaScript you don't always like half the time words are smushed together and
Mhm.
or have like quotes around them or a bracket, and I'm like, and to say this is like English, which it is, there's spaces, it's full words. I'm like, this makes my it's like it's easier that it makes my head hurt more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so select ID, name from.
Mhm.
Is name another column or a row or
Yeah. So I forget. You can do describe. So MySQL has a command called describe where you can like describe a specific table. And so this table has 4 columns. It has a column called ID, a column called name, age, object, and then it will give you the type of the column, right? And it will
Oh.
say, okay, like this is int, so it's an integer or a number.
Mhm,
This is varchar, which is a variable amount of characters. So this is
mhm.
like in JavaScript, this would be a string, but you see it has like 50 here. It's limited by 50 characters. So if you were to try to add a value into a row into the name column that was over 50 characters, it would like reject it. And you do this to like save space in your database. It also,
And then,
like smaller sets of values are like also easier to search. They're more easily indexable as well, all that fun stuff.
and then Nick just said, are those code points just like JavaScript strings? And Learner said not code points, but sizes.
What are,
Does this all make sense to you?
are those code points like in JS strings? Oh, not fully. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see what they're saying. No. No, this is like, yeah, this is in the number of characters. JavaScript, I don't think JavaScript is never strict in like what size something should be, unless it's not strict, I don't think, anywhere for like what size something should be. You can like make something like 1,000. Like you can make a very, very long string in JavaScript and it would just be fine. Whereas in here, like you have to define what size everything is.
And right now we're doing everything in MySQL, right?
Yes. And even for Postgres, it's the same way. The data types for Postgres are a little different.
I was going to say, I think the data type for Postgres is text.
Yes.
And that's why I was asking, is I was like, I get it. And I think it's a little different just because I've been doing a lot of my stuff in like PG admin as my tool to be able to view everything.
Oh, for example, an emoji is one char but multiple code points. Oh, yeah. No, this is just in like number of characters. I wonder actually what size an emoji would be if I stuck it into a database. But I think emojis are, I forget how these work, but like emojis and special characters are like when they're represented in certain places end up being like that sort of 4-character starting like with an ampersand and then the sort of like set of numbers that you have representing that special character. Yeah.
This is all making sense.
I hope so.
Yeah. It's also just like a lot of like processing as well.
Yeah.
In the fact that, and you had this up on another screen, and I just want to call out, this is something, and I appreciate you going through this with me, it is pretty easy to Google SQL queries and like what you want to do, but actually understanding what you're typing and what each section is not as easy, especially when it's like, you mentioned earlier that if you wanted to write like a really long query, what is a time that you've had to write really long queries, and can you give us an example around that?
Yeah, so generally all the queries that I use like in my application are pretty small. The longest query that I've had to write was that query that I had to write at Courier, which, man, that did a lot of things, at least for me, because I just had never had to do it before. So at Courier, I wish I could draw this out somehow. So at Courier, we were trying to figure out how many people had used a specific version of a product, of the previous product that we were building. So I helped build a product called Preferences at Courier. Let's say you get an email sent to you and you want to unsubscribe from it. Courier handles all the unsubscribing logic, handles all of the behavior around that. And so we had a few different versions of it. We were launching the newest version, V4 Preferences, and we wanted to go see how many people had used the previous versions. So in order to do that, because it was in multiple different places, I had to like make a query that went to our users table. And I wonder, yeah, this should be okay to talk about. I shouldn't get an email about this. Went to our users table and then like searched for a specific property in the users table. That property was in JSON. So I had to like take that JSON and break it out and do like Snowflake supports searching within JSON objects, I believe, or like filtering within them. So like I had to like go like take that piece of JSON, break it out, search for a specific property in that piece of JSON, join it with another table, And then I think I had to join it with one more table after that. And so doing all of that was a bunch of lines. But once it was done, it was done. Yeah. Okay.
What I think that's a great call out of like, why would somebody put JSON into a database? Because I'm like, isn't JSON kind of like its own database? Kind of.
JSON is really just a way of like structuring data. So it's just a bunch of keys and then a bunch of values. This sort of pattern is mirrored in a lot of databases, right? So like, for example, Cloudflare has something called workers KV, and it's a key value store. Dynamo is a key value store. So you just have like a piece of sort of something to identify the data and then the actual value of the data.
Okay.
And then JSON is just the specific sort of notation that it uses because it's like human readable and all that fun stuff.
Interesting. Okay. Because I was like, for some reason, I always thought they were pretty similar. But,
yeah,
or almost like the same thing and I always got very confused on why somebody would want to put it in there.
Yeah, it's similar in terms of like the way that you store things, just different in terms of like what you do with it. The reason why we had JSON in our database, and there's JSON even in my database, well, in Courier's case, Courier was using DynamoDB, and so all of the values were stored in JSON. They don't necessarily have to be stored in JSON, but we were using JavaScript, and it's sort of like a good pairing there. And so when we were taking that data and putting it into Snowflake. Snowflake is our data warehouse that I use to like query all of these things. It was just like JSON in a SQL database, which is okay in that aspect. If you're doing like, if you're storing JSON and you're using it for an application, like it's like less good because SQL databases don't handle JSON very well. It tends to be a lot of data in sort of one place, and you want to split that out to make it like easy to query. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
It did. And I think that's something that I'm like, okay, cool. Like that is something to start to noodle on and think on, because we'll see if you sign up for this or not. I know I might get one more at least stream out of you, but to go into more detail, because this has helped a lot with like just getting unstuck on some of what each of the areas mean, because I think it's very difficult to know, like, for example, the first part is a command. Okay, cool. I wouldn't have known that to know, oh, I need to Google and figure out what command I need to use.
Yeah.
Or, the same with like the asterisk is calling out the column name, which might sound a little silly, but Alien, Diddy. I'm going to just like try to come up with so many different names for you until you're on the stream, so that way I actually call you the proper name. Oh, it's gotten bad. Like every single time he joins, I'm always like, your name changed again. I'm not great at names, as we've talked about in general. But yes, I'm very excited. If it helps, I can send you some new dates as well, because I don't know if it shows them all yet. But all right. We talked a lot about the basics, and I know we got to like the column name. Do you have an example where we could be like, ooh, yay, some juicy Astro 3 version 3 content? What I'll say it like this. If somebody has a blog and they have like categories or tags, or they want to add more information. Sorry, I'm hitting my mic now. What like how would somebody query something like that properly if they want to search specific categories, or if they want to only do something from like X date? I feel like that's kind of confusing and putting it into like real usage.
Yeah. Let's see if this dummy database has that sort of data. It sort of does. So based on that, it would sort of be like the same process of saying like what, like, okay, sweet. So how do I explain this? So if you have like a blog and you want to like get it from categories, it would really depend on like how your database is set up. But like, let's use sort of this dummy database as an example because it's here. And like, let's say you have a bunch of actors. What's a good one that we can show a join off? Okay, here's a good one. You have a bunch of addresses. And let's say you want to get every address from a specific city, right? What you would do is you would like say, okay, well, I know that all the addresses are stored in one table. So you would say like select, and then you would sort of figure out what information you need or what columns you need and specify that. If you need all of the columns, you would just sort of have the asterisk. And then you would say, where do I want to get this from? I want to get it from the address table. So even though this query won't work, let's just like write it out. Right.
Oh, okay. So it's select from address, and then what if I wanted the district column? It would be select district.
Yeah. So if you wanted only the district column, you just say select district. There you go. From address.
Okay.
And the district column looks like it gives you. I scrambled all the data here, so it looks silly, but usually this would be like some sort of actual district. Let's say you wanted the actual data. Oh, okay. Does that make sense, by the way, before I like move on to like how you would like find or like join this data?
Yeah, because it would be select column, or like command column table. Is that the way you would say it, is command column table?
Yeah.
And then learner said select asterisk from address where city underscore equal ID question mark, where question mark is your city instead.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be like the sort of full thing that you do if you wanted to get if you wanted to get it based on just a specific city ID, right? So
Okay.
the sort of where is the thing that I said when I said limited to. So
Okay.
this is get all of this data, but only if these conditions are matched. So in this case, like it'd be city ID is like 300. So if I wanted to show, let's do this for a table that you can actually see. I'm gonna need to refresh this page. Cool. So let's say you only wanted to get this first row, and we know that the ID in the first row is 1. So you'd say select ID from alpha where ID equals 1. And then I have this weird formatting here where it just like shows one row as a different table or a different table format, but it does the same thing, right? It just only gets the first row. So let's say I wanted to get it based on like the user ID. You just change sort of the column here from name to this. Sweet. And it would get the same row back.
Now, you had multiple that I think had the age of like 20. How would you pull them back if they all equal 20?
You just get all the rows that match that. I think there's only... there's a few that had different ages. There's a bunch that have
22
age.
was...
Yeah. So yeah, these are all the rows that have an age of 22. in this very jank formatting that I haven't fixed yet.
No, that's totally fine. This is still super helpful. So I could do select from, like, select all columns from table where column is whatever I want to have it show.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. So like if
Okay.
you had a post and you were like, I want to get all the posts with this specific category ID, you would do like the same thing. As long as you have the category ID stored in your post table. If you didn't, you would have to do, you'd have to make sure there's some piece of data like in the post table that is also in the categories table so that you can make a query that sort of links the two, if that makes sense.
Oh, Nick brings up a good point of where is like filter.
Where is like a filter? Yeah.
Is
There
like a
is
filter. Okay.
there's actually I guess a statement in Siegel called like, where it sort of, it does, I guess, I'm not sure if you would call this fuzzy searching, but it is, yeah, it's SQL will like help you find things that are like other things. I wonder if this would actually work. Like, where age is like 2. Nope, there are no rows here for that. But yeah, there's actually a statement in SQL called like, where you can do searching that is like a little bit, that is not like exact searching, if that makes sense.
Like is
Searching with wildcards.
okay.
Yeah.
It's like an array of conditionals that return true or false. In the end, you only get to see results that return true. For strings.
So you can also, like, if I wanted to say, I think you can do this as well, where age is not 22, and you would get all the rows whose age is not 22.
Okay. Underscore matches one of any character and percentage matches multiple of those.
Gotcha. Yeah, I forget all of the wildcards
Oh.
for like, I actually have to implement them like today or tomorrow. So
For the like operator. I think this is a big part where I'm getting stuck learning them is I'm like,
Mhm.
cool, I can see something and I'm like, okay, this is starting to make sense. I'm getting it. And then all of a sudden nothing makes sense again because I'm like, I don't know which part of the query I need a
Mhm.
Google to replace.
Which part of the query you need Google to replace? Yeah.
Like let's say that I gathered from looking at this query, I'm
Mhm.
like, you did exclamation point equals 22. And I'd be
Mhm.
like, oh, if 22 is what's being queried and it's
Mhm.
not showing 22, I can see that that is not 22. But off of looking at it, I wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily know, well, what if I needed to do the same thing with a different table or not a different table, but a different column? I wouldn't have known just by looking at it because it's an
Mhm.
asterisk that it's a different, that's the column name.
Yeah, well, this asterisk is just saying you want to return all the columns, right?
Hmm.
So if I only want to do like one column and I still want to have all these other conditions, like you can still have, you can still say I want to take name and have a sort of filter on the age, right? So this still works properly.
Right, but I wouldn't have
Mhm.
known that by looking at it.
Gotcha.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Mhm.
there's a lot of I've noticed there's a lot of JavaScript as well that is very apparent by looking at it, but it doesn't necessarily make it easy to um, change or know which parts to change.
Yeah.
Because as Roy and okay, Anthony, who else do I get to name? Jacob, Josh. Basically, lots of people like to yell at me for not reading the documentation. And
Mhm.
yesterday I was so excited. I went and I read the documentation and I was getting somewhere. And I told Roy, I'm like, I'm lost again. And he's like, how you sent me the right doc. And I didn't realize that I went and clicked something in the doc to go search it so I would understand it. And then I got lost there and didn't go back to the original one.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I got lost in the docs.
Yeah.
It takes talent.
Just, yeah. I would, man, when I was first learning Siegel, this is maybe a year or two ago. I forget what resource I used, but there's a bunch of SQL games that I actually really liked doing. I don't remember where they are, and I'll have to find them later. But like, it basically will just run you through like, okay, like this is what you need to do in order to like query a bunch of things, and it will just sort of like, it's almost like a typing test for SQL, which is fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Like write the statement and like see if it matches the data that you need to get out. Yeah.
And Elian, yes, writing docs, I completely agree. And it's so worthwhile. And I'm so glad it's out there. What I've learned a lot about myself is docs don't always give, it's not as easy to pick up context or see what else somebody is doing with it.
Mhm.
So if I don't understand a word, I have to go search that word, and then I get lost trying to get back to the original document of remembering what I was originally doing,
Mhm.
which is just, that's me in general. But then it's also something that I've learned quite a bit about, that I don't know if it's everybody or just like a weird thing I do, of I don't always know the word that I want to search. So even though the docs are there, I don't know what I'm looking for based on, like, I haven't learned that terminology or I don't remember that terminology. And again, context can't be written. I feel like it's not possible.
Yeah.
Where watching somebody's tutorial, you could normally see where they might have gotten something or how they typed it to be able to get to that same spot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. It's good. I am challenging myself to get better at docs. It's there. There's sites like SQLBolt and Select Star SQL. Ooh. I will check those out. I will definitely check those out.
Yep. Anything after where is what data points you want to include based on conditions. Yeah, that, and then like how you want them. Yeah, anything after where is that based on conditions, and then there's commands like order.
Ooh, show us order.
How to sort
what is
them.
Ordered?
Ooh, we're going to challenge my very tired brain, and it's so order is just like sorting basically. I wonder. I believe it's like order by, and then I should be able to do like ID. And then you also specify how you want them to be sorted. Okay, there you go. Wow. Okay, so this is basically saying I want to order this by this column, and then the direction you want to order them by. So in this case, it's easy for the ID column, right? Because I have IDs 1 through 5 for all of my rows, and then DESC is short for descending, and so it'll order it descending, right? And then you can do ASC, which is ascending, and it'll order them by ascending. I believe, I might be wrong about this, but at least for numeric columns, right, everything is ordered by ascending by default. But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I'd actually have to look that up and just double check. But yeah, generally, all of these things are ordered by ascending. There's also group by. So same thing or similar thing. Group by. You can group by a specific ID. I'll do age in this case. Oh, I need to. There's always another step that I need to do with group by that I always forget to Google. Yeah, but group by will like let you sort of group all of these things together, so you could have like all the 22 ages close together, if that makes sense.
That's pretty cool.
It's how you inserted them by default. Okay, yeah, that would make more sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you
There's
have
always
if you
so
have an
much
ID,
coolness.
yeah, if you have an ID, so okay, this is I think the thing that I was trying to explain but failed. So if you have I think this table, anytime I insert a row, the ID is will auto increment. So anytime I insert a row, I never have to think about what ID I need. It will just like add it to it will just like see what the last ID is, and then the next row will have an incremented row. There you go.
That's pretty cool. I've been using Strapi, which is something new that I've never used, but it's actually pretty cool. It builds the database content, like you can visualize it a lot easier. Let me see if I can bring it up, which is interesting in the fact that like it's the first time I've seen more of a visual version of this. Let's see. And one of the big reasons that I'm wanting to learn more about queries as well. I'm also doing it for, work and making videos for it. I'm like, I should probably actually understand them. I don't know why I just like totally spaced, but I was like, am I doing NPM or NPX? And I've always done NPM. So for some reason, I don't know why I suddenly was like, let's do NPX. Oh, why did you just, okay, whatever. There we go. So it's pretty cool because like you can build your content types and it creates your database for you. And like you can connect it to like Postgres or anything. But then as I'm creating things, like I can create the category, the description, and see all of my content in here. And being able to do this as like a very simple way of doing things, I was like, this is really easy to, go back into, where having to remember to insert something and remembering all the things I need to insert to check all the boxes is really difficult.
Yeah. I have. Yeah, it's even for me. It's not necessarily like I can do it in SQL, but it's also just nice to have like a UI that's there that also just tells you all the things. It's like, yeah, okay, this is like it's dummy proof, as I like to say. Like it's just like, yeah, it's very dummy proof. I like things where it's like the amount that I have to think about how to do things is very low. And the more I have to think about it, the like it's fine, I can do it, but I'm also just like, I'd like to not think.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is also just what a visual learner as well. Like that is our learning types all together. And this is something that's a very visual goodness we'll go with.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. This has answered all of my questions that I had today. Was there anything that you wanted to go over before we wrap up?
I don't think so. This is a very good exercise for me too, to like review what stuff. I always have like, I spent some time yesterday sort of like thinking about like what I wanted to sort of like teach, and I always like have a hard time like getting the knowledge because I never know what I don't know. So this is like very good review to be like, okay, like these are all the things that I don't know. So and then learner, there's a bunch. I know Superbase has in terms of tools that can like let you diagram out how your DB works. Superbase has one now. I also have one, but it is very jank. And I'm working on like making it look a lot better. It uses your Prisma schema to do it. There's like, yeah, there's a bunch of tools that do them. I know there's one for Prisma as well that does it. So yeah, like being able to see how the diagram works.
Christian's going to be back.
Yeah, yes, I will be back at some point. Yeah.
Yay. Well, Well, awesome. Thank you so much again today. And let me figure out who we will, raid you guys to. So thank you
Who's live?
all. Josh is live. Bam.
Sweet.